Hey, welcome to another edition of Pete's Take On, and this episode we are going to be discussing Brexit. Now, if you want to see another highly polarizing topic, Brexit is definitely it. But I'm not going to give you my take on whether I'm a Brexiteer or Remainer, because quite frankly, I don't give a crap. I don't do politics. It doesn't live in my world. If something's important, it finds me. But I've always found out that no matter who you vote for, generally the government always gets in. So I don't to just not bother with that. But what I am going to share with you on this video is something critically important. It's a much deeper lesson. And Brexit gives a great example of how you are programmed unconsciously, largely without your awareness. Now, many people have heard me use the term sleeping awake, which is really working off autonomous actions, habits, and unconscious behaviors that you think you're in charge of, but most of the time you're not. Because whether you like it or not, human beings are programmable by design. Now, we knew this in the 60s and 50s when they did subliminal advertising, which is obviously illegal now, but when they found out how effective it was immediately banned, even though it sold loads of stuff off the shelf. So how does that apply to Brexit? Well, let me give you another take so you can understand. See, it's not a question of if we get programmed, it's a question of how we get programmed. And unless you take charge or you're aware of what's going on, most people are just suckered into an agenda that they didn't vote on, that doesn't have their best interests at heart, Brexit being a classic example. If you, for example, go out into the sunshine, let's use a physical example, then you don't get to choose whether you adapt or acclimatize to weather. The body's rule set makes that so. You live in a hot country, you're going to acclimatize. You move to a cold country, everyone's wearing t-shirts, you're wrapped up in jumpers, eventually you acclimatize. But what most people don't understand is we are also acclimatizing constantly and adapting to our environment constantly from an emotional perspective, from a psychological perspective. Pretty easy to understand if you jump in a car and you're getting a ride to work every day with your friend and he's driving and he listens to jazz and you're not really fussed about jazz, you don't really like it, it's not something you tune into. But after 3 days, you're tapping your feet in the car unconsciously. After a week, you're humming it to yourself in the shower. You get my point, we are programmable. So how does this relate to Brexit? Well, I'll give you one amazing example that numerous studies have validated to really show you the backdrop to how you were programmed, or how the British public were programmed into voting for Brexit, even though most of them didn't understand it. If you take a doctor, and a doctor's sitting in his practice and he sees all the clients coming in, and let's take a common issue these days, which is depression. Now, don't get me started on that. We'll do a Pete's Take on depression just so you understand what the reality of it is. But if a doctor's sitting there and he diagnoses somebody suffering from depression, and he can prescribe one of 3 different drugs that all do exactly the same thing. In other words, they're pretty generic, they all have the same effect, plus or minus, and so he can have his free will of prescribing which one of those he wants to give. But let's just say on his desk, he has a coffee mug, he has a post-it note stack, and he has a pen, all of which have one of those particular 3 drugs branding or name on. So every day unconsciously, he's being exposed to that information. It's going into something called the reticular activating system that notices everything around. Just like if you're at a party and somebody mentions your name in a separate conversation and you're engrossed in one here, then boom, you hear your name. All of that stuff is being taken in. So that doctor prescribes a drug. We now know under every single study, it's irrefutable, that if he has that mug and post-it note and pen or equivalent, he is more likely, far more likely to prescribe that particular drug under the illusion of free will than the other 2 which do exactly the same. So what does that mean? That means that when it came to Brexit, if you look at any of the initial polls or exit polls, 80% plus of people really didn't understand it. You had 10% of people that supported it and they had a good argument as to why. You had 10% of people that are against it and they had a good argument why. And you had 80% of people that it really just wasn't on their radar. They couldn't give you an articulated understanding of the arguments for or against, and therefore they're kind of swayable, they're programmable. Now, let's look at the word itself, Brexit. What does it actually stand for? It stands for British exit. So the media and the press, once that term was jumped on and latched onto, started programming the public, especially those 80% who could have gone either way, with the term British exit, Brexit, 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 exit, exit, British exit, British exit. So when it came to vote, and somebody's standing there with a pen and a ballot paper, and they can prescribe any of those two options under the illusion of free will, the one that they were most likely to go for was exit. And therefore a huge upset in the polls. When it came to it, it was like 49.2 to 51.8 or 9, something like that. It was like just that tiny little overlap. It could have gone either way. But because of that level of programming, we saw a swing to validate Brexit. Even though even afterwards, most people didn't know what they'd voted for. I mean, guys, come on. So when you understand that most people are sleeping awake and that it's really just time to wake up, you are going to be programmed if you don't take charge of that. And this has also been validated after the fact when we saw that companies like Cambridge Analytics through social media were heavily targeting and influencing the exit aspect through subliminal messages, through subtle ways of knowing how to program people that are sleeping awake. So that's really my take on Brexit. I don't care whether Britain leaves, Britain stays. It doesn't affect my movie because I'm the star of my movie. And if there's things out there that shift around a little, guess what? Things are always going to shift around a little. As I say, no matter who you vote for, the government always gets in. And every 4 years, if it changes, then the next government's going to try to undo what the previous government did. The next government's going to try to re-put in something that the previous government didn't, all that kind of crap. I don't do politics. You want a masterclass on avoiding politics? Go read The Inside Track. Yeah, it's my current reading place. And for those that are still stressed out about Brexit and think it makes a difference, just breathe. Yes, a great book by Dan Brule if you're into understanding breath work. That aside, guys, that's Pete's take on Brexit, and my message, as ever, is wake up! Hey, Peter here. Hope you enjoyed that video. But remember, knowing and not doing is the same as not knowing. It's not about being passively entertained. It's about applying what you've learned in your life to make a difference. If you enjoyed that, please subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified, and leave me a comment below. Let me know what you think. And if you really want to make a difference, hit the share button and share this with somebody you care about. And let's see if we can make the world a little better place.